Guys, Kahare here, and today I'm going to go a little more in depth with one of the topics that I mentioned in my Veda video, which is veil skills. As I said in my Veda video, veil skills are any ability that prevents your character from being afflicted with a status effect. It is not a cleanse, it preemptively prevents them from getting the status. So now that we have a rough idea of what veil is, let's talk about who has it. All of these units that I have in my party right now have access to a veil skill. First and foremost, I have Alba. He is a merchant. He will be coming to Global shortly. He is already announced. And he has a veil on his merchant subclass, which will become very important later. Second is Jin. He is a spy. He has a slightly cumbersome to use veil on his main. Next we have Anika, a feng shui or potentially a Taoist when it is localized for global. Also has a veil on her main. Fourth is Amaterasu with a professor job extension. For more information about the job enchant system, check out my other video. And she has her veil on her main. My guest character is Princess, who is from a previous collaboration, not currently available, but she also has veil on her main and has the most powerful veil in the game, which is why I made sure to bring her. And in my backup reserve, I have Usalia from the Disgaea collaboration, who also has a veil on her main unique class. There are a few more collaborations and other units that have veil, but the most important one I think is Princess, just due to the fact that her veil is so much more impressive and different than the veils that are more commonly available in the game. Although you may not have the 4 specific units I have as my main party, you will in general have access to characters who have these classes regardless of when you start the game. And so that's why I made sure to showcase all 4 of them so that you can get a general idea of how the veils work. And so if you run into a character and you're like, I don't know exactly what they do, but they have a merchant, you can say, oh, merchants have a veil, and I know that's good for Veda Tower progression, certain EX classes, or certain EX dungeons and so forth. Now, I just want to show how each of these veils work. Jin, like I said, has the most cumbersome one. The 4 squares around him will get veiled or protected from status, and then he teleports, which is decent, and I used it completely improperly in my example because nobody got veiled by that move. Princess has this huge veil. It is like a double wide square around her, and it managed to hit absolutely everyone in my group without her moving at all. Alba, like I said, merchant on his subclass, he has a much smaller square and it is targeted on him. He cannot move it. And that's a feature of the merchant merchant veil. Anika also has a veil. Hers can be moved. It's the same shape as the merchant one, but she has a little bit more mobility for it, and it also comes with a small heal. And so even just from that, you can sort of begin to get a picture of how the veils slightly differ between the classes that have them. The merchant is probably the second most restrictive, requiring the unit to be in the center of all of the other units. And then lastly, we have Amaterasu with her veil on her professor. And you can see here it is a very large AoE. Princess has a slightly larger one, but you can see this is a 5 across diamond, and it's mobile. She can move it pretty much all around the area near her, which means that she has also some flexibility in how she applies that veil. So I'm just going to spend some time getting Jin some more gems for another example. But I just want to talk about why you want and need Veil. Um, so the thing is, you might feel or think that you can just cleanse status effects. I have Panacea, I have bishops who have an Asuna skill, and so forth. But the thing about that is that turn order can be awful sometimes. Your Veil or your cleansing unit might be very slow, and you might just find yourself in a position where the unit that you had set aside to cleanse a charm or to cleanse a poison ends up getting killed by the unit that they were meant to uncharm. And that's going to happen if you don't have that Veil available. So this way you can just kind of go forward safe in the knowledge that you cannot be afflicted by the status in the first place. And then we have the other issue where, for example, if your unit gets petrified, although Veil can cleanse that and other abilities can cleanse that, they lose all of their buffs. Maybe they had an attack buff, maybe they had a defense buff, maybe they had haste. It's gone now. Whereas if they had Veil, they get hit with the petrify, it doesn't work, and they move on with their lives. There's also an additional way that Veil is vastly superior to cleansing, and that is in the case of curse abilities. Curses are slightly different than normal status. You might be familiar with getting charmed by an enemy or the like, and then when that enemy or when your player receives damage, they become uncharmed and you regain control of them. In later parts of Veda Tower, in the Mobius Tower, in certain EXs, you will find abilities that are applied not via status, but via a curse. Curses can only be broken by killing the enemy that originated the curse. If you have Veil up before the curse happens, your character will never be afflicted with the curse. However, once they're cursed, it usually cannot be cleansed by most cleansing abilities, and it also cannot be fixed by an application of Veil. Veil itself does act as a cleanse on almost every other case. So that's like a really excellent way to use Veil, since it can also function as a cleanse. So it's pretty excellent that way. Veil usually lasts 2 turns. It is rare for it to last a different amount of time than that. So that is another aspect of it. Veil, 2 turns, you're going to have to refresh it. That's the nature of the beast. And it can be potentially troublesome if you have a unit that's hasted or getting overclocked a lot. So keep that in mind, that the Veil is going to wear off over time. I'm just going to fiddle around a little bit more on this map before I stop. But basically, all of these units, like I said, they have Veil. They can prevent status from ever being inflicted in the first place. And that is far more powerful than being able to cleanse it after the fact, because they already got afflicted and it's already caused detriment. It got them unhasted. It got them unbuffed. It made them lose their turn order. And that's or the person who you have set aside to cleanse, they're slow and they don't make the uncharm in time, and you end up with dead allies and the like. So all of that's not so great. And Veil prevents pretty much all of those problems. So that's pretty cool. I want to talk a little bit more about what I said earlier about Alba and the Merchant class. The nifty thing about the Merchant class, like I was saying, is that it is the sub job that holds the veil. And what that means is that you can have a character assigned like a proper combat class, if you will, for their main class. And then their subclass is merchant and able to provide that veil. Obviously, if their main class was professor or a Taoist, it doesn't matter. They already have a veil. But there are some characters who have, say, for example, a debuff class like Necromancer, or a more focused combat class like Dark Cavalier. And they're also able to throw that merchant subclass in and be able to add veil to a team that's still very combat focused. So while a professor has the largest uniformly available veil size, merchant has the ability to take that class ability and use it during other class configurations. So just a cool thing to think about with that aspect of it. I also want to go more in depth about what I was saying about using merchant as a sub job. When I use Alba, I tend to use him in this Dragoon class instead. And while I could give him a merchant sub job, I lose a lot of his utility by doing that. I lose access to a pretty hefty attack buff, a single target, and an AoE jump. And in general, he becomes a poorer unit for using that merchant sub job. Iris, another collaboration unit, also has access to merchant. I don't currently have it unlocked on her. She can use it as a sub job. However, it loses her access to this really amazing magic and attack buff. However, we have units like Marianne, who is dark and has kind of a lack of dark support. That's a pretty common problem in the dark color. It continues to be a problem even to this day on the Japanese side. There is some, of course, but it's a little limited. And the thing is, Necromancer is a debuff-oriented class. Causes death sentence, slashing debuff, and, but is still primarily focused towards combat. But she does have access to this merchant subjob, allowing her to kind of play a mixed debuff and buff support unit, which is a pretty cool mix. She's not considered the highest tier of unit. She's kind of okay. But, if what you need is some dark utility, a unit like Marianne can combine Necromancer and Merchant for a good balance of those two things that you're looking for, debuff support and buff support. So it's very important to understand what you're giving up by replacing a subjob with Merchant. Sometimes it's a really bad idea, sometimes it's a really great idea. And so it's very, very important to know what you're giving up as well. So even though Merchant, having Veil able to be transferred over when you're using a character in a different class doesn't always mean that's the right choice. The Spy and the like, or the Professor, you're not making any concessions when you change their sub-job because their Veil is on their main job. So it's just important to know that about Veil as well. It's not always the right move to put it on a specific character. But ultimately, play around with it. You may find that you have Alba and you need him for Veil and you have to give up the Dragoon subclass, but the Veil outweighed the extra damage that he was no longer able to bring because you had the Veil utility. That's just sort of a really broad strokes about Veil and a little bit of how to incorporate it into your teams, why it's useful, and so forth. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you tune in next time I put out one of these videos, and I hope they're helpful. As always, you can catch me on the Discord and or leave a comment down below, and look forward to hearing from you next time. Thanks.